What up, everybody? Welcome to, wow, I had problems this morning. Welcome to another episode of Coffee Hour with me, Paul Abernathy. Thanks for joining me today on the show. A little bit bumpy start there to the show, but I wasn't paying attention. I was talking to somebody. So anyway, welcome to Coffee Hour. My name's Paul Abernathy. Thanks for joining me today here. And didn't give you much of a notice, did I? This morning. Okay. Well, anyway, it's Friday. We've made it to the end of the week. So thanks everybody for joining me. That happens to join me here at this coffee hour in the mornings. Little updates on everything. We have finished our first interactive video over on Fast Tracks Tube. It's exclusive only for those folks that are on Fast Tracks Tube. Good morning, TJI. Glad to have you here. Again, sorry for the bumpy start this morning. I wasn't paying attention, and the next thing you know, boom! It was time. I looked down and I was like, "Holy crap! It's time to start." So, thanks for joining me this morning, Paul. Good morning from Houston. Thanks for y'all getting any snow in Houston. I know they're getting snow up where I was from, up in McKinney. Let's see here. Edgar, good morning, Edgar. Thanks for joining me today. So we're going to answer some questions today. And I haven't even looked at the questions. They were two of them that Darlene pulled up onto the queue. And typically I do podcasts on these. I haven't looked at them. And as you would expect, these two questions are long. So, I mean, it took multiple slides to be able to bring these questions to bear, because it was definitely long questions, and so might end up being short answers, but they were long questions. So hopefully you're ready for that today. And one of the things that we go all the way, we work through the work week, we get to the weekend. A lot of times people want to bail out right here on a Friday, but we still got a few more hours to go. So everybody that's heading out there in the field, at least you got your coffee and get started. So these are our new mugs that we have, our tradesman series, okay, master and journeymans. So if you're interested in those, they're over on our store. Red Dog, thanks for joining me this morning. And Crassodium, is that what it is? Morning, glad to have you here this morning. So, all right. So the last thing I will tell you, well, not the last thing, before we get into the talks today, the questions that I'll be answering today. First thing I'll tell you is we do have the webinar scheduled for tomorrow. It's at 10 a.m. Eastern time. If you want to sign up for it, you just go to our website and you'll see where it has a webinar link. You click on the webinar link and you'll go down, you'll click the link, and you need to be a registered member of our website. Don't have to buy a course, just have to be a registered member. And then you will click where it says to sign up, and you will follow the instructions, and that will get you set up for tomorrow's course. And then it will have a link to where we will be holding the webinar. It'll be in the link that you get when you sign up, okay, in the email. So that should be taken care of. If for those that are interested in joining me for that, that's where it'll have all the information there for that. So make sure you check that out. Again, that is over on our website at fasttracksystem.com. So make sure you check it out there. All right. Okay. Houston, 37 degrees in Houston. Okay. Well, it is, I'm not sure what's the temperature here. It's 11 degrees where I'm at. Starlink is obviously working, so that's a little applause for Starlink. Okay. Not here, kind of rural in the country, right? But Starlink is working. So anyway, all right. So we're going to look at a couple questions that were presented to me in the Let's Ask Paul. Although, you can do it as well. You can submit questions, and I won't do this every Friday, but some Fridays I will just randomly answer some questions that people submit. And what I do is I don't always look at the questions When I'm doing a podcast, sometimes I look at the question and I go, I answer it on the fly. I don't do a lot of that research stuff because the reason I don't is because it keeps me sharp. It lets me be on the spot, if you will, as I try to answer questions. And I like to do that. Otherwise, it just gets monotonous for me. So I get a lot of questions, dude. I get a lot of questions that submit to me. So what do we got here? Adam, welcome. For my pint of coffee for this educational. Yeah. Yeah. Some people say I'm long-winded. So people say, well, maybe I should have a gallon of coffee, right? For my coffee hour. Yeah, no doubt. Anthony, welcome, Anthony. Absolutely. There you go. Got your application in. Cool. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. 6 is a good one to get on. You'll get a lot of debates on code panel 6, especially with all this arguing back and forth over different wiring types and stuff. That'll be interesting. 2, that's the 2 is always the one where it's embedded with a lot of manufacturers. So good luck with that one. Hopefully they'll be able to get you in there. Eric, good morning. Thanks for joining me this morning, wherever you're from. Again, for those that are joining me in here, coming in a little late, I did have a little bumpy start this morning. I wasn't paying attention to the launch, so I didn't give it like a couple minutes for people to be able to come in here because I really wasn't paying attention. I was answering a question for somebody that called me early this morning, and next thing you know, I'm not paying attention to the time, and I look up and it's like 1 minute. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So TJ says it's 48 and stormy in Alabama. Hold on tight. Delacroix filled me in on some stuff. Good deal. Good job. Vincent Delacroix with Siemens. So there you go. He can fill you in on much more than I could fill you in on. He's much more in tune to it than I am. He's very energetic about it. Me, I'm like, I'm trying to get off the code panels. I like code panel 5. I don't care much for 17, but I'm just trying to get off of the code panels. I'm kind of done with it. So anyway, after as many years as I've done it and the arguing, Daniel, welcome. Thanks for being here. Eric says happy Friday. Absolutely. It's payday. And then Adam says here, he's in Oregon. It's 5 a.m. here. Wow. You getting up at 5 a.m. for our coffee hour? That's amazing. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Let me go on and get into the show. Oh, by the way, again, one more time, if you want to join our webinar tomorrow, which is basically on Raceway Phil and everything about Raceway Phil, make sure, if some of you might be old hat, for some of you, it's an opportunity to ask certain questions. Again, you can register by going to our website. Our website is fasttracksystem.com, and you will see the webinar link on the navigation or on the page. Click that and follow the instructions. Click on the link, and you can get registered for tomorrow. All right. For those that are interested, it's free. Doesn't cost you anything. I do these. I agreed to do these with my board of directors. I agreed to do these a couple times a year. So this will be the first one for 2025. What's up, Frank? It's Friday. Absolutely. Little. Yeah, shakes my whole thing when I do that. All right. Let's go on and get into today's lesson. Hold on for a second. I don't know what I did. All right. Anyway, I did something. Okay. So let's go on and get into today's questions. So we're going to look at the questions that were submitted. And again, you can submit your own questions at paulabernathy.com. So feel free. And if you have any comments or questions, just let us know. I'll bring it up onto the screen and we'll try to answer any questions. That's what it is. Q&A. I like how that sounds. Q&A Friday. We'll see. All right. So now I'm trying out a new feature. Oh, by the way, again, I want to tell you, folks, if you go over to the Fast Tracks Tube, those that are enhanced members or that subscribe to Fast Tracks Tube, you will see under the video tab, you'll see what says interactive quizzes and videos. We have a new test one over there. Go give it a try. It's very simple. It's based on the video that we did for closets and luminaires. And so let me know your feedback on what you think, because we're going to be using that feature in it. And I may show it today if I have time to show you how you navigate it if you're interested in that. But we're going to be making many more. That's the very first one to kind of dip our toe in and see how the software works. And you can watch the video and not have to do the interactive part if you want. Or if you do the interactive, you're just flipping through the bottom part where the questions are. So you watch the video, it'll pause, you answer the question, and you keep going through, and it keeps your score. And so we've been just kind of playing with it, but it's available now over on Fast Track's Tube. And you basically just go to the video and the navigation. All right. Now I can show that for those that want to see that real quick. Let me go on it, because I do have some people that have asked about it, so we want to make sure that I show that. Let me show you that really quickly, just really quick. All right, so here's over on the Fast Track's Tube, and hold on, let me do this so you can actually see. Hold on here. I don't know. You can't really see it, so that's going to be pointless. So up here under the navigation, you'll see where it says videos. And then you'll see that there's an interactive video tab. You really can't see it. I didn't adjust the screen too well. And if I screw with it, I'm going to mess it up. So I did this on the fly. But if you hit the interactive, you're going to see that it brings up the very first video that's interactive right here. The very first one that's on closets and luminaires. And of course, you got to be logged in to see it. But I'll log in just so you can get an idea what it looks like. Hold on for a second. Let me get over here so we can get it. Okay, so once you go into the interactive and you click here, you're going to see that it has a start, and you click the start button. Okay, you click start. I've already answered these. I've already answered 4 of them because I didn't want to answer them all so I can use the concept. What up, everybody? Paul Abernathy here. Welcome to another education. Okay, so it starts, and you probably can't hear the audio, but it starts. And you navigate, you can watch the video or you can use the quiz. So once you answer it, when the video pauses, then you just hit the arrow over here to go to the next one. 10 minutes. And it'll pick up from there. All right. And it'll pause. So today we're going to be talking about closed closets and the loom. And they'll pause. So here's what the code says. So you're in a closed closet, out from the wall 24 inches. Okay. And you come up 6 feet luminary. Okay. And see, so as you can see here, it's depicted. Here's the 24 inches. Now, what cannot be in that space? Okay. Or what cannot be in the closet altogether? All right. Anyway, well, these are luminaires okay, so it's interactive. It keeps the score, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of a neat little thing that we're working with. But definitely you're going to use these navigations left and right if you want to participate in the little quiz. If you just want to watch the video, you just hit play and you can watch the whole video. But these, if it pauses, then that's because it's waiting for you to answer these questions right here. Okay, so it's just a little neat thing that we're doing over on, and it keeps a score. And of course, down here, you'll be able to see other video recommendations. And of course, it keeps your rank and everything like that. So anyway, just kind of cool. You can click and you can see the points leaders, that type of thing. Ranking, I'm the only one that's played, so there you go. So there you go. So anyway, that's what we've got, and that's what we're working on. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So that's a pretty neat little thing that we're going to be doing. All right. Good morning, Manny. Thanks for joining me. And let's see. Frank, hit the like button. We appreciate everybody that hits the likes. Let us know you like it. We're always trying to expand and add new things. So this little feature where we make videos more interactive just gives you an option if you want to utilize it. That's all. If you don't want to utilize it, just watch the video. And the video will always be there anyway without this quiz. This quiz is something that we do as a bonus to a video, but it doesn't mess with the fact that you get to watch all the videos you want. It's just you go to the videos and go to interactive quiz, then you can do the quizzes. Watch the same video, but you get to do quizzes. So we designed it in a way that it's not going to interfere with you watching videos over on the tube, if that's what you want to do. Okay? It's just an extra bonus feature that we're doing. Okay. All right. So let's get into today's question. So these are long questions, and the individuals that submitted them submitted very long questions, and I want you to submit as much detail as you can in order to be able to answer the question. Now, I'm telling you right now, this is not. It's 3 or 4 slides. So you got to read it and stick with me in order for us to be able to answer this question. And I'll do my best, and we'll go to the NEC where necessary to look these things up. Okay. All right. So first of all, it says, hey, Paul, wanted to get your opinion on something that is always a hot, topic in Nebraska. I am not sure how long this particular issue has been enforced here or not, but I've been an inspector with the state for about 3 years, and it's always been how the state views this. It deals with utility supply disconnects, and that's going to be a very important thing here. A utility supply disconnect. Okay, so again, there's going to be some things in this question that probably can't answer. Okay, because I just briefly looked at it as I was pasting it, and I was like, there's going to be some things that we're just going to have to shake our head at. And in case, obviously, if you're coming in late, let me know where you're from and give a shout out in the comments. And if you have any questions or anything you want to ask, let's have a conversation around this question. Okay, feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to, wade through it and see if I can't give other additional information. And those that are coming in late, this is we're just doing a Q&A Friday. We're not on a normal lesson today. We're just doing Q&A and trying to answer some questions. All right, it says here, it's been for the last 3 years, this is how the state views this. It deals with utility supply disconnects with overcurrent protection. We basically ignore these disconnects and all applicable codes for services from this point apply. Okay. All right. It says, I'm in an area where I work with electricians from Colorado and Wyoming, and this makes things tough because they do not enforce this the same way. Wondering if this is something I should try to get changed here, or if there is no harm in just leaving it as is. Are there dangers in any way that say objectionable current, etc., since the grounded conductor gets bonded in 2 different locations? We do not require the equipment grounded conductor until after the customer or contractor supplied service disconnect. Okay. People get quite upset when you tell them utility disconnect cannot be used as the service disconnect for this instance. A mobile home installation, force them to add another disconnect that we will honor as the service disconnect. Okay, you're mixing a lot of things here, because if you're talking about a dwelling, we have one thing. Now you're talking about a mobile home installation, which again can be different because typically the service gets mounted separate away, okay, on a pole, typically. And again, from there, it goes down and under and over to the mobile home, and that ends up being a feeder. So it's not mounted in or on the mobile home, it's remote from the mobile home. Okay, so again, it's a lot of this is going to depend, and you're going to hear me, a lot of this is going to depend on the utility, okay? Now, it says, we're on the 2023 NEC here, but with some limitations that had to be agreed upon before legislature would adopt the code due to the Home Builders Association. No surprise there. Pushback. Yeah, there's no surprise on that one. One being we had to leave out the exterior disconnect for 1 and 2 family dwellings. That's the irony of that, considering the way the utility is with what they're doing. Okay, but they had to leave that out. All right. And for those that are not familiar with that, that is the 230.85 requirement, where it required to have the exterior disconnecting means emergency disconnect. So, okay. All right. Well, maybe they defeat that anyway, because if your utility in your area is putting a disconnect of their own, then, that's obviously outside. So, maybe that kind of meets it, and that's why they feel that way, I guess. But you said that other areas are doing it different. So, anyway. And it says a couple others that have nothing to do with the topic, but but thought you might be interested in is surge protection at 1 and 2 family dwellings. I guess they got rid of that. GFCI protection on the 240 volt circuits. Yeah, look for a change, guys, in the 2026, because us at Code Panel 17 actually took control. I don't know if I explained this to folks before. Us on Code Panel 17 actually got control of the list of appliances that have to have GFCI protection. And I believe, it could happen differently at the Nip Man, but I believe we are going to successfully remove, don't hold me to this, okay? Shaking the house. I believe our code panel has refigured our vote and may not be requiring GFCI protection at ranges, ovens, or, just wait and see. We'll see what happens. But we have changed some of us have done a change of vote because we were given Code Panel 2 gave the purview over to us for this, right? I believe. Don't hold me to this. Don't say Paul promised. But I believe we're going to get control of it, and then we are not convinced of the compatibility issues, especially with the high frequency issues with some types of fridges and things like that. We believe that there is possibly a conflict issue, so we might be getting rid of it for the next cycle. And it all happens really quick, folks. So it was there, it was in, they might be removing it. Stay tuned. A lot of things happen, okay? So wanted to keep you up on that. All right, back here. So anyway, in their state, they got rid of the GFCI on those 240 volt. I would assume that it's not all 240 volt. It's just the things that are probably like the ranges and ovens. I can't imagine they got rid of every 240 volt application where they wouldn't have it. But anyway, could be, but I doubt that. And then, of course, and the GFCI protection in finished basements. And no, I did not type this wrong. This is how he sent it. Okay. But again, you know how that goes. We all do that. All right. So they got rid of that. So they did it. They did agree to adopt the code as is in 2026. So I guess that means the amendments are only right now. But when 2026 comes around, they're going to take the code as what it is. No amendments, maybe. That'd be great. I do not like amendments. All right, so as always, thank you for all you do and the education information you provide to us here. Okay, so let's come back to me and answer some of this question, or attempt to answer some of this question. First of all, and hold on, my phone keeps going on. Let me silence this thing. Okay, first of all, we have to remember that if the utility wants to put a disconnecting means in, and it really has to do with if the utility runs all that and installs every piece of it, then it's basically under their purview. And what that means is they can pretty much do what they want, and there's not a whole lot that you or I can do about it. And so that is the one thing that we have to understand, what is not covered by the NEC. Okay, so with that said, we're going to look at the code. All right, here's the NEC, and we're at Article 90, all right? And we're going to be looking at, let's see here, what's covered and what's not covered, all right? So one of the things we're going to look at is here, installations under the exclusive control of electric utility, where such installations consist of service drops, service laterals, and associated metering. Okay, so in our situation, if the utility is installing it, it's not the electrician's install, and they want to put it out there, then they can. And what we'll call this is really no different than, let's say, a meter disconnect, if you will. And basically they're passing through this, and they have to remember that they can put this overcurrent protected device on it. And I don't know why my timer is still here, because I got rid of my timer. Sorry about that. Thought I'd gotten rid of the timer. There we go. And so basically, the utility is saying, look, we don't care what you like. We're going to be doing it. And since you can't control it, it's outside of the scope. Then what happens is that's what you would tell the people that don't like it, right? You have those people that say, well, I want to be able to use it as a disconnect, my service disconnect. Well, what you tell them is, look, it's outside of the scope of the NEC. It wasn't installed by the electrician. It was installed by the utility. Remember, if it's overcurrent protection, then there's no way that a ground fault's going to trip it. Okay, that type of scenario, right? So now you still have your grounded conductor. You still have your two hots. They're running everything down. They're utilizing the grounded conductor. The code does allow you to use that grounded conductor on the supply side. You can bond that grounded conductor at multiple points. 250, 142 lets us do that at multiple locations on the supply side. So them connecting to the grounded conductor, not a problem. You connecting to the grounded conductor at your service at the dwelling, not a problem. The issue with them is that sadly you can't control. So technically what should happen is if those conductors have overcurrent protection, true overcurrent protection, which is short circuit, ground fault, and overload, then that becomes your service. And then everything downstream, you need 4 conductors for separation. Again, that would, by not doing it, be a violation of 250.24b in the 2023 edition of the NEC, right? Problem is you can't control what the utility is doing, right? You can't control what they do no matter what you do. Now, if you want to try to change the state, chances are they may still have nothing to do with the utility. Utility might say, well, you can change your state when it comes to the National Electrical Code, but this is still outside of the scope of the NEC, what they might say, right? So the real service disconnect, the real service is the one that's to serve the dwelling, right? And if that scenario, that you're just going to do everything that you normally do, your grounding electrodes there, make sure 250.50, they have grounding. You don't have anything to do with the utility. So therefore, I would hope you're not expecting that. That is outside of your scope. That is utility folks that want to do that, okay? And if that is the case, it is perfectly okay for them to do that. Again, all it's going to really provide is overload protection. There is no breaker to trip downstream, so nothing's going to, from that scenario, is going to trip that breaker. Now, you could have a bolted fault that'll trip it, so they might be accounting for that. Or something like that. But other than that, there's no real issue. Now, as far as the raceways, let's say from that disconnect that they're utilizing for the utility, right, and your service, and we're also going to go look at something else in the code real quick here in a second, in 230 for services. But as far as the raceway, for example, we do this all the time anyway, right? So remember that typically in utility, the meter is bonded to the neutral. It's allowed to do that on the supply side. A lot of times we have wireways that are on the supply side of our service disconnect that are bonded to the neutral. Those issues of what people say, wait a minute, doesn't that cause objectionable current? That's an example where, one, we have not defined objectionable current in the NEC. We haven't defined it. We tried for a couple cycles. We can't define it. Why? Because when you start to talk about objectionable currents and stuff, you have to define it by saying it's an unintentional connection. But there are occasions where the code allows us to make these intentional connections. An example of that is when we're able to do 250.142 on the supply side. We can connect to the neutral conductor. So basically, from the supply side of your service disconnect, it's really trying to reduce any touch potential, bring everything to the same potential, so you don't get shocked if there's no real difference of potential. So that's really why, and we do that, and it's become an acceptable practice to do that. So whether or not they put a disconnect with overcurrent protection in it upstream is really irrelevant to the principles of what we are able to do from an NEC standpoint. So my advice is, personally, it's not a bailiwick that I would challenge. The electricians that don't like it, again, I could be okay if they ended up saying, oh no, that is going to be moving forward. That is your service disconnect, right? And then they run 4 conductors from it, okay? Then I'm okay to your remote distribution panel, which may be the panel at the side of your house, which is now a feeder panel. Okay, that's fine. And maybe they pay for the service disconnect and I ain't got to pay for it and all that kind of stuff. Great. But if you install it and you're running everything from it, then it is governed by the NEC. If they're installing it and it's exclusively the utilities, then they have an out. They can pretty much do whatever their blue book, green book, whatever book they have. And just remember, from a safety standpoint, having that additional disconnect is not going to hurt anything. You're already allowed to have the neutral bond parts on the supply side of a service disconnect. So there, it doesn't really hurt anything. If they determine that that is all part of the utility till it gets to your service disconnect or to your meter, and you didn't say where the meter's located, then that's pretty much, that's up to them. It's outside of something that you can control. Real quickly, though, in the code, I just wanted to go look at, we're in the code. We looked at the 92. I wanted to go look real quick at 230. Anybody else got any questions or any insights? Feel free to let me know. Dude, I'm not the guy that, I don't know it all. I'm just looking at these for the first time, really, as you are. So we want to make sure that we look at them. Okay, so here is a list of what we can have on the supply side of the service disconnect. Let's see, well, meter disconnect switch, maybe that's what they're doing so maybe it's a meter disconnect switch. It just so happens that it is a circuit breaker style. Okay. You know what? It's really kind of, if you think about this, we install, you don't have to, but we install remote distribution panels all the time downstream that have a main breaker that doesn't need that main breaker. It is overcurrent protection. It has all that stuff in it, right? But it's really just a switch. And that's all we're using it for in that scenario. So maybe they're looking at it the same way. But don't get that confused as far as the NEC is concerned. As far as the NEC is concerned, if that was under the NEC, then that is the service disconnect, and everything downstream from it needs to have 4 conductors, and we need to separate, okay? So it seems to me that all of that is under the utility aspect of it, and we really have no control of it. So as far as we're concerned, what's being brought to our house is just 3 conductors, and hits the meter and then goes to our service disconnect. You get what I'm saying? Okay. Manny says, do you have to bind the neutral on a generator? I don't know how that is any way related to today's question, Manny. But if you have a generator that is separately derived, means the transfer switch is switching the neutral, switching it totally, not a solid connection, but switching it. If it is a separately derived system, then you're going to have to put a system bonding jumper in it, and that would connect the grounding conductor over to the frame. Okay, and obviously you have to establish a grounding electrode system there at the generator. If it is separately derived, 99.9% of the generators are not separately derived. They basically, the transfer does not switch the neutral. So if it's not switching a neutral, then the generator gets installed just like, let's say, a range. 4 conductors, and you make sure that the equipment ground and the neutrals are not connected together. Okay, so the only time you have to worry about putting a system bonding jumper in there and connecting the neutral to the frame or to the equipment ground and everything there is if it's separately derived. And the only way it can be separately derived is if you switch the neutral. In most residential generators, you do not switch the neutral. Okay, now I had a case where I was on where they did install the wrong transfer switch, and it was, they sent the wrong transfer switch, and the installer just installed it and didn't pay attention to it. And anyway, he did create circulating currents by putting in a system bonding jumper out of the generator, and how he did it. And anyway, the little child got hurt, and I was involved on that. Maybe I'll tell you that story one day. I don't know if the statute of limitations on that is ended. I was supposed to be very quiet about it after it was a settlement at the end. But anyway, I hope that answers your question, Manny. All right, so let's go back to the NEC real quick. Okay, so maybe that's what they're doing. It's a meter disconnect switch. Let's see, I don't see any other aspect. Here's the emergency disconnect that we get from 230.85 y'all heard me talking about. Sounds like this gentleman's state is kind of mark that off. And then that's it. Okay. And there's the emergency disconnect, folks, that we talked about, which is required for 1 and 2 family dwellings. And it has to be outside. Okay. Okay. And it also has to be, here's interesting, that emergency disconnect means shall be installed in a readily accessible outdoor location or within sight of the dwelling unit. Okay. So either on it or within sight of it. Okay. All right. Anyway, there we go. In this right here, where the requirements of 225.41 are met, this section shall not apply. Basically, what this is saying is if you've installed one for the feeder and you met the same basic rules for the feeder that mirrored this emergency disconnect requirement, then it's saying, okay, well, then you get to ignore all this section right here because you already did it. And that would be an example where you had the feeder panel located at a dwelling. And if you're meeting all the rules under 225.41 for that, then they pretty much don't have to meet these. Again, it's redundant. It's basically what it's saying. And I'll show you 225.41. You see, it's the same basic rules. So it's saying if you happen to have a feeder that is supplying the building, outside feeder right here, it's 225, then it's saying, you know what? You ain't got to go back and follow the service requirements. You got to you can follow the feeder and you're considered okay. Okay. Absolutely. Have to have all the proper labels and markings. So that's the marking rules right here. Okay. Got to have all this proper marking rules depending on whether or not you're dealing with a service disconnect, whether you're dealing with a meter disconnect that is not a service disconnect, or you're dealing with an other listed disconnect switch that is not service equipment. It's just a disconnect switch, because that's all this rule is talking about is an emergency disconnect. Could serve double duty and be the service disconnect and the emergency disconnect, but you have labeling requirements. And of course you have sizing of these markings, these labels. Okay. And people ask this all the time. The labels have to be located on the outside front of the disconnect enclosure with a red background and white text. Okay. And it goes without saying, it needs to be rated for the environment. Okay. All right. Enough of that. All right. Let me get back to the question. All right. So that was the question. So hopefully that answers your question. Obviously, it is not a significant upfront hazard because your state sounds like they've been doing it for quite a long time. It sounds to me like the utility owns that disconnect. And I'm not going to call that a service disconnect. We'll just call that a disconnect. It's a utility-owned disconnect. It's outside of the scope of the NEC. Sounds like they run those conductors from that over to the dwelling, and then they hit the meter. So that becomes where you take over and the NEC takes over, that type of thing. Now, if you want to fight that because of electricians arguing that why do I have to install another disconnect? Well, that's for them to fight, not for you as the inspector. And so unless if they want to have a problem with it, I'd tell them to fight it, right? As far as you're concerned, I would just say, look, it's outside of the scope of the NEC. You don't have to worry about it. And it does not really, that's an example of objectionable currents that have been accepted for years on the supply side, okay, of the service disconnect. So again, we can argue the semantics of, yes, Paul, but it is overcurrent, so it should be a feeder. It should have 4 conductors. That is true. However, it is owned by the utility company, and I can't dictate what the utility company does. I can only dictate what I do on my premise, and I know where this service disconnect is going to be on my premise, and I deal with it that way. Okay? Again, it's probably not something I would fight with the AHJ or with the utility. But hey, I'm all about a good fight, so give it a shot. All right, question number 2. All right, so this one is dealing with the 2020 edition of the NEC, so I have to gear my 2020 up. All right, and let me get to where I probably need to be real quickly before we get into it. Okay, so let's look at this question. So here's a question. This is, again, in multiple questions that was submitted. It says, it's a 2022, and it says, dealing with Article 680.26A2, this is the perimeter surface. So this is the surface around a swimming pool, okay? It says the perimeter surface to be bonded shall be considered to extend 3 feet horizontal beyond the inside wall of the pool and shall include unpaved surfaces and other types of paving. So remember, when we're talking about this also, believe it or not, includes just the grass. So even if we have a pool and we have 3 foot out and it's just grass around it, we still, believe it or not, that is the unpaved surface that you still have to put. And you have rules in 680.26 on how you address that, whether you can put the single 8-gauge ring around it or not. And again, we're in the 2020, so things are a little bit different than they are in the 2023 when it comes to this. And so that's why it's so important. I had a guy ask me the other day, and they're always great questions. I had a guy ask me the other day, he says, I'm studying for the electrical exam, and can I study the 2023 code even though the exam is on the 2020? And my advice is that if you're preparing for an electrical exam, study on the edition that you'll be testing on. It makes it much more complicated. And I know it's a cost thing and people don't want to own multiple books, and I get it financially, but this is your profession. This is your job. So investment is part of the process. So I said, you know what? If you're going to be doing the 2020 exam, you need to be studying the 2020 flat out. Okay. So that's basically what I had to say on that. All right. It says, I am speaking about concrete pools that are considered conductive materials such as water permeability and porosity. So he's talking about a concrete pool, not a vinyl pool, not a fiberglass pool, but he's talking about a concrete pool that does, all concrete, whether you paint it or not, does have porosity. That's why the paint will wear off over time. It does absorb moisture. It typically 2 ways to create a conductive pool shell. Either you have rebar in the concrete. The rebar is not encapsulated, so it's just rebar in the concrete. And together that forms a conductive pool shell with the concrete absorbing the moisture, okay? Or you have a concrete pool that may be fiberglass reinforced, but if it is a concrete conductive pool concrete, then I'd have to put a copper mesh underneath it, okay? 12 by 12 squares, and it would follow the contour underneath the pool. That would be what we'd have to do if it's a conductive pool shell. Okay, so in this case, he's saying it is. We'll assume that it is in rebar. We'll assume that it is considered a conductive pool shell because he says that it has permeability and porosity to it. So we have a conductive pool shell. So that's the first rule. We have that. The next one he's talking about is A2, is now we have a 3-foot perimeter. And what do we do with that? So that kind of sets the tone to this question. All right, now, again, multiple questions, multiple slides here. So bear with me. It says, hi, Paul. I enjoy your content and learn something every time I tune in. We see a lot of pools being constructed right up to the back of the residence or patio within 3 feet of the pool water, okay, or 3 feet of the inside of the pool, okay. The patios are typically poured concrete with structural steel. Could be steel matting, like a fencing. It could be the rebar that's in it. Okay, all right. It says, I am an inspector. Have request that this patio steel be bonded to the equipotential bonding system. Okay, so if one thing to look at is if it is the pool conductor shell in that patio within 3 feet, and we're only focused on the 3 feet first. That perimeter, if that is the metal that's in the conductive, concrete, yes, it should be bonded at 4 points on the conductive pool shell. All right, so it should be connected to whatever the rebar is that's in your conductive pool shell. Or if your case, it was poured concrete and they put a copper mesh underneath it as what would be required if it was truly a conductive pool shell, then they need to be connected together, okay? Bonding all of these parts together in this equipotential grid, okay? So it doesn't matter that if it extends out more than 3 feet, it's irrelevant. The portion that is around the 3 feet needs to be bonded to the conductive pool shell, okay? We have that part of it, okay? says, of course, I get a lot of pushback, people stating it harms the integrity of the structure in the patio. That is where I call, where do I got here? I've got my notice that I go, that's my bullshit notice. That's the official bullshit notice of, well, that's all I've got. I'm going to have to come up with a new sound. Give me some advice on different sounds you think I should add to. That's my bullshit notice for today. It ain't going to have a damn thing to do with the integrity of the structure of the patio surface, simply bonding the metal together. Really? If that was the case, it would have the same problem inside the conductive pool shell. And the last thing we want is to have integrity problems with our conductive pool shell. So yeah, so whoever told them that, they're full of crap. All right, next. Okay. It says, I agree that once the rebar is exposed, it should be treated to protect it from corrosion. Obviously, yes, if it's outside of its encapsulated pool shell, where oxygen can get to it. Again, I will remind you that even rebar will rust. It doesn't necessarily affect the integrity of it. Now, if it's exposed out into the open elements, then yeah, have them treat it. I don't know that that's an electrical inspector's thing to do that, but you can make a comment about it. If it's being used, like the rebar that's being used for a UFR ground, if it's exposed, then we treat it because it's part of the integrity of the safety system within the structure. In this scenario right here, if we just had rebar that is part of, that's the biggest part that causes problems with the integrity of the decking, is that you have the rebar that's exposed that gets rusted and that type of thing. That could have an issue with it. But other than that, no, I don't see a problem with it anyway. But yes, they protect the ends so it doesn't deteriorate or cause rusting. You'll all be dead before it really gets to be an issue. But anyway, okay. It says, my question is, should the patio or the building structure be bonded to the equipotential bonding grid if it is within 3 feet of the pool water? Thank you for your assistance in that. Okay. All right. So there we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to go real quick and we're going to look at all the bonding requirements. Okay. And again, there's a 3 foot type of scenario that we're working with. And so we're going to go to 680. If I can find it, we're going to 680.26 and look at the elements here. Okay. Let's get to the code. We're going to answer this gentleman's questions. Charlie says real quick, what is a UFR ground? A concrete encased electrode. So this is the rebar in the footing that's at least 20 feet that goes around the footing. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about rebar that's being used as the structural component in the concrete around a swimming pool, which could be just wire mesh, that type of thing. Could be fiberglass, to be honest with you. But we still have to put this 3 foot equipotential, and we have to go around the perimeter. That's not a UFR. A UFR is on a dwelling that is part of the grounding electrode system if you choose to install it. To look and see what a UFR is, go to 250.52. I believe it is A3. Might be A2. I believe it's A3. One of the two. Go look at it. And that is what an actual UFR is. In our grounding and bonding course, we have a neat story about a UFR and Herb UFR, and that he wasn't the only one that contributed to developing that back in the 60s and 50s and whatnot. But there's a lot of AHJs along the West Coast that assisted in this. And he did the initial studies on a military base and all this thing. That's UFR. We're not talking about a UFR, but it's very similar to a UFR. Okay. All right. So let's look at the code real quick. Hopefully that answers your question, Charlie. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Here's where we're at. Okay. So equipotential bonding. Okay. Here is the equipotential bonding required by this section. That's section 26, by the way. Will be installed to reduce voltage gradients in the pool area. So that's its function. It's to reduce the touch potential. You don't run it, you don't bond to it, connect to it, and run it back to your panel. Don't need to do that. You don't run it. It's not to be used as anything to do with the house's grounding electrode system. It is simply there to reduce the voltage gradients, touch step potential when you step out of the water, usually within that 3 foot, unless you're like my son who's 6'11". So in your stepping, he's got this long gait, right? Like a freaking Sasquatch. So in this case, if you're stepping out of the pool onto that 3-foot area, you're not going to have any touch potential. Okay. All right. So anyway, maybe we should also talk about this. This would be a great topic one day to talk about why you bond the pool water and what happens. Maybe y'all want that. Somebody send that in to Let's Ask Paul, paulabernathy.com, and say, hey, Paul, I want you to do an episode on talking about the equipotential bonding grid and how we do it with pools and spas and all that kind of stuff. Hey, that'd be a great episode to do on Coffee Hour if you're into pools and spas and hot tubs. Hey, these shows are what you want them to be, folks. All right, so let's go down and see. So bonding the parts. Okay, so creating this grid around the pool. It says the parts specified in 680.26B1, and B1 is that conductive pool shell that he said was there. Okay, we're going to argue with it. We'll say it's there. Through B7 shall be bonded together using solid copper conductors, insulated, covered, or bare. So again, this is interesting because we're not talking about the grids. We're not talking about the grid under the pool. We're talking about connecting them all together. And connecting them all together, they could be solid copper, insulated, covered, or bare. So people say, no, it's always got to be bare. No, not the interconnecting components, just the actual code grids or what the code tells you to do in B1 through B7 has to be. But if you're connecting these various parts together, they don't have to be bare because they're not part of the grid. They're the interconnecting component. So again, I get that question a lot from people, but I think more often than not, it's bare and everybody uses solid 8-gauge bare to do it, okay? But just keep in mind, it also can be done in certain situations with rigid metal conduit of brass or other identified corrosive resistant material. That is an example of connecting down to, let's say, a wet niche where you might be able to use a rigid metal conduit or brass to go down for the wet niche. So that bonds down there, bonds up to the deck box. Okay, that could also bond to the grid. So again, you have options here to be able to do this. Okay, now, connections to bonded parts shall be made in accordance with 250.8. And y'all know what that is. We did a little video on TikTok on that. This is all of these methods that you can connect together. And again, whether it's clamps or acorn clamps, or just make sure they're identified for grounding and bonding, make sure that they're identified for direct burial where you're going to use them for. But you're going to use one of the methods in 250.8, which pretty much covers all your termination allowances. Okay. And it says an 8 AWG or larger solid copper bonding conductor provided to reduce the voltage gradients to the pool area. Now listen to this, folks. Shall not be required to extend or attach to remote panel boards, service equipment, or electrodes. So brings up a good point. Like Charlie said, what about the UFER? This is not a UFER. It may look, walk, quack, whatever, like a UFER. There may be rebar in the concrete. It might be like, damn, Paul, this is the biggest in contact with the earth. Why can't I use the pool? Okay, no, you're not using it as an electrode. The code will actually tell you that you can't use it as an electrode. So again, get that out your mind. But there's no reason to be connecting this back to the panel. There's no reason to do this. Inadvertently, it will all be connected together by certain connections, but no, you don't have to do that. So you hear it said, it shall not be required to extend it to a panel. This is just for the pool, folks. That's it. Just for the pool. Okay, the voltage gradients. It's not to clear any breakers. It's not to do anything like that. All it is to create this same touch potential. There's no difference in touch potential because current travels due to differences of potential. That's how we get shocked. We're at one potential, we touch something else, we get shocked. We're at a different potential. Okay, we might be grounded to earth. That circuit's 120. We touch it, comes through us, different potential, we get shocked. So all we're trying to do is bring the voltages all up to the same so that really it masks it. You don't feel the difference because you are going to have current traveling on the earth. You're going to have voltage around. You're going to have concentric neutrals from the utility. You're going to have all kinds of things. And that's the reason why we do all this equipotential bonding around pools. Okay? All right. That's for a whole nother lesson. But if that intrigues you, I will tell you we have a great pool series over on Fast Tracks Tube that me and Vince, hey, there you go. Me and Vince Delacroix did. We haven't done one for 2023, but we did it for 2020. Go check it out. It's a 7 or 8 part series over on Fast Tracks Tube. And it's worth the annual membership alone to watch that entire series on swimming pools. Okay. All right. So we've got a conductive pool shell. All right. So he's good. So here we've got reinforced structural steel. Okay. And again, it's unencapsulated. It means it's not, the rebar is not coated in anything that isolates it away from contact with the concrete. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Where they happen to be using encapsulated, okay, in non-conductive compound, this is what I was talking about earlier to create that conductive pool shell. If that is the case, then they're going to run a copper grid shall be installed. And right here, it starts and it tells you exactly how you run this grid. And you heard me talking about it. 12 by 12 inches. It uniformly covers underneath the entire pool. It's a simple pain in the butt, right? So you either got fiberglass pools, you do nothing to the pool shell because it's not conductive, still got to bond the water. We could talk about that in a later episode. Why you have to bond water, kind of interesting topic. But you could have a fiberglass or a vinyl that are not conductive. You still got to bond the water, but you don't have to bond. There is no conductive pool shell or everything else that would be a conductive pool shell. Okay. And you follow this installation. So that's what you do on that. Okay. So let's move to the perimeter surface. All right. So here's what it says. It says the perimeter surface to be bonded shall be considered to extend 3 feet horizontal beyond the inside wall of the pool. Okay, so question was right. Out 3 feet. Got it. And shall include unpaved surfaces, grass, and other types of paving. Paving tiles, concrete, whatever, crushed stone, those type of things. It says perimeter surfaces separated from the pool by a permanent wall or building 5 feet in height or more shall require equipotential bonding only on the pool side of the permanent wall or building. Okay, so this is a scenario as where you have your pool, you have your perimeter surface, and you have a what? You have a wall there, okay? So if you have a permanent wall or a building 5 feet in height or more, okay, so permanent wall there or 5 feet of height or more, wall, and let's say that it's only 2 feet away, right, from the pool, only 2 feet away. It's really close. Then, I mean, because again, let's assume your jurisdiction allowed them to dig the pool that close to the dwelling. Scary with the footers and everything. But anyway, they let you do it. You know, weird things happen in Florida too. So, all right, because they love their pools in Florida. So if that's the scenario, then the house, let's say, is right there. You only have to worry about the equipotential bonding up to that wall. Okay, that's it. That's all it's saying with that. Now, it's saying bonding to perimeter surfaces shall be provided as specified in 680.26B2A, B2B, or B2C, and shall be attached to, listen folks, and shall be attached to the pool reinforcing steel or copper conductor grid at the minimum of 4 points uniformly around the perimeter of the pool. Okay, so if I have a conductive pool shell, right, and it comes out, rebar or whatever you use in the copper grid, whatever, then this perimeter gets connected to that conductive pool shell's material, whether it's rebar or the copper grid. And again, copper grid, I love copper. It's expensive to put that mat all the way underneath it. So most people are going to go, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to put rebar in the concrete and then I'm going to turn that rebar up. And typically what I see is they'll turn that rebar up and continue it out 3 feet around the footprint of it. That's typically what a good pool contractor does. But they could just stub it up and then you end up putting a grid around it. And what kind of grid are we looking at? Okay. And it also, real quick, it reminds you right here, if it is a non-conductive pool shell, again, like fiberglass or vinyl pools, then basically you don't have to connect to the 4 points. It's not required because it's not a what? A conductive pool shell. Still got to bond the water, but that's a whole different topic, okay? All right. So what can you do in this scenario? The pool perimeter. Okay, again, this is 2020 NEC, not 2023 NEC. Okay, not 2023 NEC. There's a difference because we did change things for 2023, but I'm answering this gentleman's question. Now, so we have the reinforced steel that can continue around it. Okay, and of course you bond it in accordance with 680.26 B1A. And so B1A is right here. That's that structural reinforcing steel. Okay, that's what it's saying there. Just giving you a reminder. Or B, notice it says B2B, which is this one. It could be a copper ring. Now, this copper ring is where structural reinforcing steel is not available or is encapsulated. So you start out, if it has the reinforcing steel in it, you use it. Then it says, well, you know what? Where the structural reinforcing steel is not available or is, by, let's say it's encapsulated in some kind of compound that makes it what? Not in contact with the concrete, so it's isolated, maybe in some kind of capsulation coating to preserve the rebar. Again, don't know, but you need to know. Ask your pool people. Obviously, you're going to get out there while the rebar is being installed and all that kind of stuff if you're the pool contractor, hopefully. If you're the electrician that's doing the pool wiring. So anyway, if it is a copper ring, and that's what you're using, then it says the copper conductor shall be utilized where the following requirements are met. 1, it has to be at least 8 gauge. 2, it has to follow the contour of the pool. Okay. As 3, only listed splicing devices, exothermic welding shall be permitted. Those again in 250.8, and those that are listed for the application. Next, it says the required conductor shall be 18 inches to 24 inches from the inside wall of the pool, so out 18 but not more than 24. And the required conductor shall be secured within or under the perimeter surface 4 to 6 inches below the subgrade. Okay, so if it's not in it, then it's below it. And obviously, if we're dealing with grass for something like that, then you'd put the 8 around it. It's going to be down in the grass, down in the 4 to 6 inches. Okay. All right. And then of course it introduced or to B2C, which is this one here, the copper grid. It says where the structural reinforcing steel is not available or encapsulated, you have an option. You could do the ring, which most people probably will do. But there's been some debate whether or not that is reliable or not, but it's still permitted in the code. We tried to get that removed in the 2020. Really compelling arguments that really the ring it's not reliable to just go with an 8 gauge around it and connect it at 4 corners. There was a big argument, and I personally, I'll just give you my opinion. I hate to do this, but I'm giving you my opinion. I don't believe the reliability of the 8 gauge. I think it should be the grid. But people say, Paul, you're saying that because you want to sell more copper. I get it. I get that all the time. That's okay. But the studies that I saw, I wasn't impressed with the 8 gauge. And nobody can find where it came from. Nobody can find in the code where the history says that testing was done to the 8 gauge around it between 18 and 24 inches. And nobody could find that study. We on the code panel could not find that study. Nobody could present it to us. But since it's been in the code for so long, we were just like, where are the bodies at? We don't see a whole lot of bodies for it, but there are reports of people getting shocked. So, we're like, I don't know. And they did present some data when they tried to get nothing but the grid option in. So our solution as a code panel was like, you know what? Let the customer be the choice. We'll put the grid in there and let them have an option. Okay. So that's what we did with that one. Okay. So there you go. It's the grid. Okay, and this just tells you that the grid is 8 gauge grid. It's like a mat that lays out 3 feet around the perimeter. Yes, it does have to be connected. Same concept to the actual the grid. If you have a conductive pool shell, they have to be connected together. Okay, same concept. Use listed splicing devices, and this grid is secured within or under the decking. Again, 4 to 6 inches below the subgrade. Okay, now. As far as connecting other electrical equipment to this grid, okay, this is what the person was asking, all right? Fixed metal parts. So B7, it says all fixed metal parts shall be bonded, including, but not limited to, metal sheathing cables and raceways, metal piping, metal awnings, metal fences, and metal doors or window framing. Okay. Now, that is a generic statement for anything that's around this pool. Okay. We'll just call it pools. Keep it simple. Anything around this pool. That's generic. Okay. There are quite a few exceptions here. Well, I say quite a few. There's three. And keep these things in mind. So the question was about the patio. Typically that rebar or that metal that they're putting down is going to be in all of the actual patio. So obviously you're going to be if it's within 3 feet of the pool, then you're going to be using that for your perimeter, right? To bond to it for the perimeter. The fact that it extends out further onto the patio is irrelevant. Okay, you really don't have the touch potential there because it's not near the water and touch, but it's not going to hurt anything. It's certainly not going to cause any deterioration in the patio. I don't know who the world ever said that, why they would say something like that. It's just sitting there. It's not going to do anything. Okay, but there are certain things that you will not have to bond. Okay, and we're talking again metal parts. The first exception is those things that are separated from the pool by a permanent barrier, like a wall, that prevents contact by a person shall not be required to be bonded. Okay, so if you have a permanent wall here and something is on the other side of the wall and you just can't get to it, it's away from arm's reach, then obviously you don't have to bond it. Okay. Number two, those that are greater than 5 feet horizontal from the inside wall of the pool shall not be required to be bonded. So anything that's out, greater than 5 feet, even if it is fixed metal parts, maybe a fencing. If it's out more than 5 feet, you don't have to try to bond it. You don't have to try to bond the poles. You don't have to try to bond any of that. It's further away than that touch potential from the water in the pool. Okay. Exception number three says those greater than 12 foot measured vertically, vertically up above the maximum water level of the pool, or as measured vertically above any observation stand, tower, or platform, or any diving structure shall not be required to be bonded. Okay, so those that are greater than 12 feet measured vertically above the maximum water level of the pool, okay, so that would be the point of the water where it would overflow out of the pool would be the maximum water level, okay, and at 12 feet above that, don't have to bond anything up that high. Chances are you're not going to come in contact with it. And we all know you're not going to have utilities running over it. We have our own rules for that. To keep the utilities outside of that. We have those rules in 680 as well, so we don't have to worry about that. So don't really see, I don't know if they have an illustration, but this is kind of a good example of bonding the rebar in the pool shell before it's poured, okay? Whether it's going to be gunite pool or whatever, you see this right here, and I don't know if I can blow this up and try to blow it up a little bit. You see right here? So here are the connections. And these are different types of connectors that are listed by 250.8. These are the listed type of connections, okay? So you see how they're all being used here to tie all these. And there's your 8 gauge running around, connecting it, and it's probably going over to the rebar or whatever's being used at the 3 foot perimeter. Or maybe it's bonding over to a ladder that's going down into the pool, okay? All that type of stuff is being reinforced, okay? All right, so that answered the questions that I got today. And man, that hour went quick. So we didn't do any Q&A from our database. So let's plan on Monday being a exam prep day. How about that? So on Monday, if you're trying to study for the NEC or you want to enhance your skills, we're going to do basically exam prep questions and answer day. We're going to put up a bunch of questions on the screen and we're going to dissect them and answer them, and we'll do a exam prep Monday. We haven't done that. Get your week started with exam prep and everything like that. So anywho, hopefully you got something out of today's episode, something that you may not have known before, or hopefully that answered the question for the gentleman. So again, my question is, should that patio structure be bonded? If that patio is metal structure, if it's within 3 feet and it's fixed metal, it's at 3 feet of the inside edge of the swimming pool, then yes, it needs to be bonded. Okay? Absolutely it does. Can it also serve as part of the perimeter 3-foot bond? Absolutely it can. Are we concerned the fact that that rebar or that meshing that's for the structural component of the decking extends further out into the deck? Who cares? Who cares? We're only worried about the 3 feet and any other fixed metal part that's within 5 feet of the pool, okay? If it's over 5 feet, we don't have to worry about it, that type of thing. So, right? Or if there's a barrier that separates it, hell, that barrier could be only 2 feet away. We have to have what? The equipotential plane has to go at least up to the barrier, right? But when it comes to the barrier, we don't have to go on the other side of that barrier, okay? So as long as it's 5 feet high of a barrier, or if it's the building, then we don't have to worry about the other side of it. We just worry about the side that we can step out onto, okay? You know what? One last thing, I'll go on and cover, since I'm already over my freaking time, let's go on and cover this, because I do get people that ask this question. The water. Let's tackle this water question just real quick. That people ask. Hold on, let me go here. I got my hand literally slapped. Okay, so I got my hand literally slapped from a gentleman that's very high up in NFPA at a meeting when I was a NEMA rep, and I was conveying a message to the individuals. This was in Tennessee. And I told them that the manufacturers also like the fact that you bond the pool water, because what happens is if you bond the pool water and a radio falls in it, let's say, and maybe it's just a radio with a hot and a neutral, and the radio falls in, okay, and it gets in there, the water, depending on the chemicals, it could maybe not trip an overcurrent device because of the voltage gradients in the water, right? And so it creates a hazard. So when we bond the water and the circuits that are supplying luminaires and that are maybe in the water or other things, then we have a higher potential to trip a GFCI device than if we did nothing, if we didn't bond the water. Because if we bond the water and it's isolated, let's say it's a fiberglass pool, okay? So can't get current into it traveling on the earth, it's fiberglass. Heaven forbid it comes in from some other way, like a metal steps that go out and then connect into the perimeter, and then, okay. But the problem was you couldn't, you have no way of getting the voltage if it does get onto the water, because you do have fiberglass pools that have lights installed in it, then it sits there, right? And creates that voltage gradients. And so if you dropped a radio in it, then it would have the chance of giving another path for current to flow, which is how GFCIs function, is there's a possibility that it would not trip. So providing that path allows the potential for current to flow in an unintended path and allows for the GFCI device to properly function. Okay, whether you buy into that, you want to slap Paul's hand, that's what the manufacturers of GFCIs told me back when I worked with NEMA. Either way, you have to bond the pool water, unless it's already done by virtue of, let's say, a metal ladder and a conductive pool shell and everything's tied together. Then the water is probably going to have enough surface area, 9 square inches is already in contact with the water, then you're done. But let's say you have a fiberglass or you have a vinyl pool. All right, let's look at what the code says. It says, where none of the bonded parts that we talked about, different metal parts like the ladder that you have to bond to if it's metal in the water, all those type of things, where none of the bonding parts are in direct connection with the pool water, a la, let's say, a fiberglass pool or a vinyl pool where everything is plastic, that type of thing, it says the pool water shall be in direct contact with any approved corrosive resistant conductive surface that exposes not less than 9 square inches of surface area to the pool water at all times. So it can't be above the pool line where it, again, where the water has the skimmers and it won't. It's got to be sure that that metal is always in contact with the pool water at all times. Now, there are little devices that you put down in the skimmer bucket that's going to stay underwater all the time. You may have a ladder that already does this. It has enough surface area. There is devices that you'll put in the circulation of the water, a little piece that you put in the plumbing system where the water will circulate through it. There are many ways to do this, but you have to bond the water, okay? Now it says, the conductive surface shall be located where it is not exposed to physical damage or dislodgement during usual pool activities, and it shall be bonded in accordance with 680.26b. Okay, so I don't know if we don't see a picture here, but the good commentary. Here's some commentary. It says, the bonded items such as ladders, rails, and underwater luminaires are in direct contact with the pool water and provide the required surface area. It is not necessary to provide another conductive element if you have those things, and they're all connected to the equipotential bonding grid. A conductive pool shell in contact with the water also satisfies this requirement. Hey, that is one that people seem to misunderstand a lot. So they have, like this gentleman's question, if you already have a conductive pool shell, it qualifies as a conductive pool shell, concrete with rebar, it's a conductive pool shell, it's porosity, all this. There are still inspectors that are out there that say, oh, I want you to bond the water. And you have to look at them and go, the water's already bonded due to the conductive pool shell. I don't have to run something extra to bond the water. It's already done. But that is not the case for fiberglass or a vinyl pool, okay? Then it says, however, where the pool does not include any of those items, it is necessary to install a conductive element. Devices have been specifically listed as a means to provide the contact with the pool water. And they are available out there, and they can go, some of them go down in the skimmer, some of them will go in line with the recirculating water of the pool. There's many different devices out there. Again, you could have a metal pool that's bonded to the grid. All metal parts, again, remember, bonded together. Anything within 5 feet, bonded together. That 3-foot perimeter, bonded together. All this together, well then, if that's in the water, and that's going to stay in the water, okay, in other words, below the skimmer level, it's going to stay in the water, and it's a ladder, and it's obviously that's going to have at least 9 square feet in surface contact with the water, then you're good to go. But again, if it's a conductive pool shell, and you have an inspector that says, oh, I want you to bond the water, and you look at him and go, this whole freaking conductive pool shell is touching the water. It's porosity. It's gonna, whether you paint it or not, whether there's plaster on it or not, it's in contact with the pool water. So it is in contact. So that rule is satisfied. All right. All right, folks. I went a little longer than normal today, make up for the short one the other day. So hopefully you got something out of it. Until next time, folks, stay safe. God bless, and we'll catch you on Monday. Have a great weekend, and we're going to do exam prep questions and answers on Monday. So hopefully you join us. Take care. God bless.